I just love motivated students. That's the best. It doesn't matter, what they struggle with in the water or what class they are in, but if they are motivated, then I get even more motivated.
Off Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. In the next episode of this series, I speak with GUE instructor Annika Persson. Originally from Sweden, but relocated to Norway, but now spends as much time as possible chasing her love of cave diving in Mexico. She first got a taste for teaching in Australia as a research assistant and eventually became a diving instructor. From her first breath underwater in the Mediterranean, her pathway through global underwater explorers, connections made through the years, and misconceptions about training. Please enjoy. Annika, how are you doing? Is it this morning for you?
It is morning, yes, 9 a.m. in Norway, yes.
Okay, and you were just saying it's a little cold over there.
Yes, it's, I don't know really now, but it's minus 20 Celsius now. And I was in Sweden the other week, just arrived yesterday, and it was quite cold there as well. So it's one of those going to a new ice age, I think.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how I would handle that cold of weather. I'm not much of a cold weather person these days. In my younger years, I enjoyed it, but I like the tropical warm weather these days.
Yes, that's where Mexico is saving me. So it's not too bad because I'm going to Mexico again in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to hear more about that. But my first question I wanted to ask you is, tell me how and why you got into scuba diving. Tell me about that first breath underwater, that first experience. What led you to that moment? Was it love at first breath? Was it, I hate this, I'm never doing it again? Just tell me all about it.
Well, the reasons I got into diving, I guess it was because I was swimming a lot in a swimming pool, back and forth and back and forth, and then my coach at that time, she had taken a scuba class. So I started thinking about that while I was swimming, and I thought that there should be some other waters around apart from the swimming pool. That's how it started. That was in '94. And I did some research. At that time, we did not have so much internet around, and so I went to the library reading books and things, and at that time it wasn't so easy either to just sign up online on a class. You had to take a telephone call or walk into a shop. But I ended up with a diving class in Corsica in France. Yes, because I didn't know that you could do cold water diving. At this time, I was in Sweden, so I went to the Mediterranean to do a diving class. I was told it was supposed to be in English. I probably had 2 sentences a day in English. The rest was in French, and I do not speak French. So it was kind of a hard start, I guess. And it was but it was a solid class. It was CMAS, the French system. And it was like a week full of training, snorkeling, free diving, scuba diving, but 2 sentences of English a day. So I wasn't really convinced because I didn't really know what to. But I think looking back at it, I think the trips to the library kind of helped me because I had read a lot about diving before. Probably theory and things that a beginner diver should not maybe get into at that point, but I did. So I think that saved me a bit because I knew kind of what I needed to know a little bit. So that was, you asked about the first birth. I remember it was not in the swimming pool, it was outside in the Mediterranean, and I did not like it. the first breath. Yeah, because I've been swimming, so I was used to hold my breath, not breathe underwater. So it took some time, but I guess it was a good class because it was a good training for students of us. And in the end of the week, I signed up to stay for another week of just diving, and that's where I got kind of, this is what I want to do. So I stayed another week in the Mediterranean for diving, so I got a bit more experience. Yeah, so that's how it started, in the French class without speaking French.
Okay. So, not liking it, why did you decide to push forward? Like, if you didn't like that first breath, is it just like, was it just like the first moment that you didn't like and then you instantly got over it? Or was it something that you kind of had to overcome?
I think because I had been swimming a lot, and when you're swimming in a swimming pool, you don't breathe underwater. So I was so used to, put my head in the water and you don't breathe. So I think it was more of a mechanical kind of small issue I kind of had, but it didn't take long. There were different kind of fishes around and everything, so it didn't take long until I was happy there. So, but of course, if the instructor is not talking a language you kind of understand, it takes a little bit more time maybe.
When you stuck around for that extra week, was that for more training or was that just for fun diving?
That was for fun diving. So I think the instructor, they just had organized, you could either come there for diving or fun diving. So I was joining in for that for another week. And I guess that's what I always tell students when I teach, that beginner students, that they need to get experience straight away after the class. But the same applies also to more advanced divers. Don't take one class and don't go diving afterwards.
So, after that first and second week of diving, when were you able to come back home and start diving more, or how was the diving going before? Because eventually, obviously, you became an instructor. So, talk about that path a little bit.
Yes. So at this time, I was in Sweden, and the climate is about the same as it is here in Norway. So I got back, and then I still didn't dive in cold waters. So, but I had this plan of going to Australia for studying at the university. So I did that, and that was also why I wanted to take the diving class before I left. I left on a single ticket. At that time, you could buy a single ticket. I don't think you can do that now. And then I stayed in Australia for 3 years at the university. So I did marine biology and geology. And of course, there the diving picked up even more. So I went in the diving club. I went on the dive charters on the weekend on standby queue. So yeah, so that's where the diving picked up in Australia for 3 years. And I guess I wanted to stay, but there are some practicalities about visas and things, and then I ended up in Norway. So I'm originally Swedish, but I've been living in Norway since '99 or something like that. So I'm both Norwegian and Swedish citizen. So coming back to Norway, it was at the work I had, there was a guy saying, "Why don't you join the dive club?" And I say, "Are you going diving here?" So then so that took a little bit of time, of course, because equipment and so on and so forth. But then I joined the local dive club, and what I didn't know then, which is still true today, is that the diving clubs in Norway are very active and very kind of accommodating and very friendly and very easy to get along with. So I think that saved me to get started. And yeah, so then I was in the diving club, and then all of a sudden I realized that taking care about other divers and helping other divers is something that I enjoy doing. So then I started with the PADI dive master, and I also became a PADI instructor. So that was how I started with the teaching. Well, having said that, when I was in Australia, I was the research assistant as well after my studies. So not being teaching in itself, but we worked on project where we were, teaching others, telling what we were doing, and so on. Yes, so that's how I started with the kind of teaching career.
Okay, okay. So, how was the transition going from warm water to cold water? I'm sure that's got to be pretty tough. So, I've never really done. I've done Texas cold, which isn't cold compared to Norway or Sweden. But how was that transition? Did it take a little bit for you to get into that sort of diving, or as soon as you got in the water, were you like, this is pretty amazing?
Well, I think I started like summertime, autumn time, and that wasn't too bad. And also, I started the cold water diving with a wetsuit because I didn't know anything else. So, because I was a wetsuit diver. So, and all of a sudden, me and my friend, we realized that, maybe we should get one of those dry suits because it's start getting out to October, and it's like we are kind of running around after the dive, running into the shower, and things that you should not do after a dive because we were cold. And all of a sudden, we realized we need to go and get some dry suits. And I wouldn't say this is the kind of advice, but I hear quite often these days people asking, "What dry suit should I get? What gloves and blah 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 blah?" And it's like, just go out and get it. Go to a shop and ask for advice and get it. Go to a dive club and ask for advice and get it and get started, as long as it fits well. When I was gonna buy my dry suit, I got into the shop, and the first thing they told me was that I needed to cut my hair short. The second thing was that there was no dry suits for ladies. And the third thing was that it was very difficult to dive with dry suit. So that was kind of my start with cold water diving. So, and I got a made-to-measure dry suit, which actually did not fit, and it was a neoprene suit, and it was quite terrible. You needed a lot of weights, and so what I'm saying these days, there are so many possibilities, and people sitting there on internet and searching for diving groups you got so much of resources today that I think I did not have in '99, which I think people today should just get out there and start diving or getting into more cold water diving as well. So
Yeah, it's definitely something that is on my radar. I think once I get in the water and get over that initial shock, I think it'll be okay. But it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to at some point in time. So it'll definitely have to happen. So you became a PADI instructor. What was your path into GUE?
the reason I got started with GUE, I guess there were 2 points of why I got started with GUE diving, because you need to become a GUE diver before you become a GUE instructor. Firstly, I had a party student that told me that, Annika, your BCD looks like it's from the 1940s. Are you gonna replace it at some point? So then I thought that, whoa, maybe I should, upgrade my equipment. So it was that point as well that I thought that maybe I should, get a new wing and upgrade my equipment. But also I had a small little dream of mine of taking pictures in cave openings. That was kind of my dream. So I thought like I need to have some proper training for diving in the entrance of the caves. And also, I guess that was two things. I guess there were actually three things. The third thing, I don't usually tell people if I don't know who is listening. And now I don't know who's listening, but I can tell it now because I signed up for GUE to get more friends, more diving friends. And this is something I did not tell the instructor, of course, on my fundamental class, because if I take the class and I do not get any more diving friends, is something maybe wrong with me, of course. So, but that was actually maybe the main reason that I got into GUI. One thing was equipment. The second was I wanted to go into cave openings. But the third one, which is actually the largest one, was I felt that I was missing out on something. And I had a few friends around here in Norway that had been taking, the GUI class, and they were hanging out together and did a lot of diving. And the day I asked them, "Can I join?" and they say, "No, you cannot join because we are going here and there." And they were also doing deeper diving, which I at that point could not do. So yeah, so I got into GUI diving to get more friends, diving friends, and yeah, and then you can. When was this? This was it must have been 14 years ago, nearly 15 years ago in GUI when I took my fundamental class, and I think I can say it worked. I think I got, yeah. So it didn't take 15 years to get more friends, but I kind of have a global network of both instructors and divers and friends, and also not only that, but I also have different resources of different, people are different, they're different professionals that you can, you know get some input from, or also enjoy diving with. So yeah, and I remember when I went for my instructor training for GUI, I went to Mexico. So, and I did my instructor training in Mexico, because then I thought, well, then of course I can go cave diving afterwards when I'm finished with these kicks and stuff. And that was actually the first time I went to Mexico kind of by myself. Before did my K1 and K2 in Mexico and things. But now I just went by myself, and I thought, well, let's go diving afterwards. And I think on that trip, I counted that I've been diving with 14 different people after my instructor training for different cave dives. And I realized, like, oh, this is the reason I got into GUI, to get diving friends, to get possibilities and open up. Yeah. And this is, of course, also what I try to tell students signing up, not telling them to have the same goals or reasons as I do, but there is a lot of possibilities as long as you get into the first step.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And there is, because I'll be, so I just took a fundamentals course, and that was one of the things that I actually had to work on quite a bit, was the team aspect. And once you able to get over that hump and start working with the team, I could definitely see how connections can be made very easily, especially when you have this agency across the board that has pretty much it's standard. It's standardized. I don't know if I said that correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's standard. So you could take a GUE diver from Sweden and a GUE diver from Singapore, a GUE diver from Mexico, and they meet, and everyone's kind of on the same page. And it's nice to see that sort of thing, just because, especially when you start getting into these higher levels of diving. And no, I definitely think it's a great resource. And actually, I have a goal to reach out, because I took my instructor course. I'm sorry. I took my fundamentals course in Malaysia. And I know there's a group of GUE divers in Malaysia, well, from from hearing, and then also there's a Facebook group. And one of my goals actually is to reach out and say, hey, we should all meet up at a pool or do something, just kind of have a little get together to meet up and network, and have that resource like you're saying. So I think that's an awesome thing that you were able to find that. And then my question for you is, when you took that first fundamentals course, how was it really challenging for you as far as like skills and getting past the course? Or what did you have, like, how was the fundamentals course when you first went into it?
Well, I ended the fundamental course with a tech pass. So starting in the end. And I guess getting a fundamental tech pass from the first time is not, it's not unusual, but it's not the most usual, as you say. It's, I don't know the percentage, but maybe, some people get it on the first 4 days on the class. Oh, actually, my class was 3 days because this was
Oh,
back in the day. So it was 3 days. Yes. So it was kind of 7 to 11 kind of thing. Yes. So this was 3 day class. We were 4 students and there was 4 ladies and there was friends of mine, so we put up the class together, and the instructor was also and is a good friend of mine as well. And I'm kind of holding back a little bit to say that I cannot say that the class was easy, but I think maybe I'm not the what would I say, I'm not saying the class was easy, but I'm saying that since I had about 1,000 dives when I got into my fundamental class,
oh.
and there were a lot of those dives had been photography dives, taking photos, as well as I have been working as a research assistant with doing things underwater. So for me to lie still in the water, that was not a big problem for me. So I was lying there and doing what I needed to do. Whereas people who are not used to lie still in the water, they will need to work a little bit more with their stability and their buoyancy. And of course, I found it a bit challenging because we were 4 people of us. So it was quite hard to work in a team, but we were like a good team, like we were 4 friends of us and so on. I had only done, I think I had done one dive with doubles before I went into the class. Before that, everything in single tank. So because I got my equipment and I just tested it in the water to see kind of approx. And for me, the class was, I call it a long hose class. That was for me a long hose class because it was kind of the first time with the wing and with the long hose and the backup, from going to what I say the traditional setup with the octopus and the jacket BCD. But also, of course, it was challenging in terms of the team aspect. Working together, we were 4 of us, and now when I have classes, I advise to be 3 is the optimal. The standard is allowing 4, but then it's good if the divers know each other from before, because then they are a bit more, into each other. Whereas it's very hard to have a class with 4 people coming from different places. But sometimes you just need to deal with it. It's better to have a class than not having a class. I think maybe one of the other students in the class was having a bit more struggling with things, but that was also in terms of the number of dives before, your experience in total. But having said that, I mean, what I see as an instructor is that the earlier you get into the class, the better it is. So you don't need to wait as long as I did, but you need to also remember that Jui is 25 years old. So when I started diving, Jui did not exist. So maybe my diving history would have been different if Jui existed when I started diving. I don't know. I remember also when the first class was in Norway, the first fundamental class or longhose class, as I remember it being. But at that time when when I started UE diving and I really liked it, I was still an active party instructor. But over the time, I realized that it's difficult to have one shoe in one organization and one in another, and also the way I want to dive and is Jui diving, so it's very hard to teach something that you don't believe 100% into. So in other words, you cannot be a Jui diver teaching a fully well set up party class, because I cannot So I ended up then working towards becoming a GUI instructor. And I guess I've been a GUI instructor now for a bit over 10 years. I do not regret any second out of it. There has been a lot of ups and downs, I can say that. It's a little bit like the ups and downs in the learning curve, but everything is like that. And I think as long as you do something you really enjoy doing, you will also develop yourself and the people you have in classes and so on.
My question that I've been asking a few different people is, as a GUE instructor, when someone contacts you to take a fundamentals course, I'm assuming if they're like Cave 1, obviously they've already taken the fundamentals course, so they kind of know what's going on within the GUE system. But when somebody contacts you for that first entry level course into GUE, what are some misconceptions that you see? Because I know I had some going in, like some that I can give it as an example. I knew GUE had a recreational side, but I didn't know anything about it. Like, I didn't really know that there was recreational GUE. Other ones, I probably just wasn't sure, but I was like, okay, if I go GUE, like, I have to do it in doubles, right? Like, I have to do my course in doubles. I have to do it in a dry suit. So when people start that conversation with you, do you get a lot of questions like that? Like, am I going to have to do this? Am I going to have to do that?
Yes. First of all, I would say people contacting me the first time for, in this case, fundamentals, because then they are a diver from before and know a little bit. There is a very big range of people. There is I mean, in summary, I've had people in fundamental classes having 10 dives from before, up to I have had people having plus 5,000 plus dives in a fundamental class. So there is a very, very big range of people, which is very good. That's what the fundamental class is for. So obviously the questions are quite varied, but I guess one of the misconceptions from, if you look at the kind of a bit fresher diver, I would say, for me, a fresh diver, maybe below 100 dives or something like that. Not to insult anyone listening to this, but you're still quite fresh, even though if you got 100 dives. But you know a little bit what you know and you don't know, kind of. You're still quite fresh, though. But there it is. People think they are not good enough to start the class because they have been reading around and seeing films and pictures and, and they think they are not good enough. So they don't want to sign up, which is a misconception because you will learn in the class. You're not coming to the class to just show off. You are learning in the class, and the earlier you come, the better it is. So that is one misconception. And then maybe from the, other spectra with people with 20 dives or 30 dives or something, a little bit fresher like that. It's more a misconception that it's only for technical diving. So no, I'm not going to go into technical diving or cave diving. So fundamental class is nothing for me. So that's a little bit of a misconception. And the reverse is true. Also that you can take it in single tank and wetsuit if the conditions allow and so on. And then you got the spectra of the people, I have had people being instructors in other organizations who have been taking the class as well. They got different backgrounds for the reasons why they take the class. Maybe some of them just are a bit curious what GUE is actually about. And they think they're going to find out that just in 4 days, but it takes a bit longer. So if you have a lot of diving experience, you're maybe an instructor in another organization, you will find out what the procedures are and how we dive in GUE in 4 days. But you need to allow a bit more time to get to know GUE divers and get to know the kind of the atmosphere around GUE diving, I would say. And one misconception as well among the more experienced divers are that they think they can come into the Dewey class and just copy what Dewey does and then do it in their own kind of, yes. And I'm saying this is kind of a little bit on the edge, maybe touching on someone's toes, but this is true and I've seen it. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying that maybe one of the misconceptions that to get into Dewey diving, you need to take the class, you need to dive, you need to enjoy. And if you're not doing that, you need to see, what can I do differently? If you look at misconceptions on, or it's not misconception, it's just a funny thing, which is actually quite important. When I got the chance to say that, which I maybe do have now, is that many divers, and I think I don't have the percentage, but a lot of divers, not the really beginner, not the one who have not been diving before, because those are excellent. You just tell them what to do and they do what you tell them to do, most likely. But the divers who are around, and the misconception is that they think they need to have the legs in an angle of 90 degrees. The misconception is that people bring up their legs too high. So that is what I found, a misconception, that people think they need to dive around with a high legs and bend in the knees. And the result of that is that they are getting a poor balance and tipping forward and moving their legs, and the back kick is not working efficiently because they cannot get the legs down. And then the day they come into a cave, they're going to hit the ceiling with the legs, or they're not going to be able to adjust as much to the profile. And the same applies when they do ascents in the open water, going to get gas in your feet. And so that is one of the legs are there to help you balance. And you can have a small little bend in your legs depending on your balance. But here people are different. So that's probably one large misconception I've seen also in cave classes and tech classes, and also the classes I have interned before I became Tech 1 and K1 instructor.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I kind of had to. I thinking about that now, going into it, when I started taking more technical classes, is I thought you kind of had to have the knees bent, like the perfect, not the perfect form, but I definitely can see that, because I definitely had that idea. I think when I first started going in, and it's all about finding that balance point, which is kind of weird, because even I remember when I was doing it, it would feel as if my legs were straight, but I would just naturally put them up for some reason. So that was kind of a thing that I'm pretty sure I had to break going into these sort of courses.
Yeah. So and sorry. So then it's also not only related to the legs, but everything that we do underwater. We kind of, if you think you are stretching out, you need usually to stretch out even more, because what you imagine you are doing is one thing, but what your parts of your body is doing is not really as much, because the same thing applies to when we need to do things slowly. The only thing people do too slowly is the fast ascent from deeper water. Sometimes they do a little bit slowly, but apart from that, you need to work very slowly. And you tell people to work slowly, and they do the things as fast as they did the last time, because the brain is not. Yeah, so the brain is not connecting. So you need to tell people to count to 4 before you do another thing. And it's like they're counting to 4, and all of a sudden they really realize that now I do things slowly. So I think it's not a misconception, but it's a learning curve in terms of learning what your different parts of your body is actually doing. And here I told you before that I had of course, different students with different backgrounds, and I also had a professional dancer on one of my classes, and professional tango dancer. And here we could put some words on, different angles of the feet and things like that. But he needs to put his words on it, and you need to put your words on it, and another diver needs to. So you need to talk to your different parts to understand what makes sense in terms of getting the best balance and position in the water. So, and I think this part it's not written somewhere. It's something that you need to. It's also connected to feeling on the water. What is the water doing, and how do I kind of move around in the water? And that's where I also say that people should. I mean, it's hard to go diving, several times a week if you don't have the logistics for it. But maybe you can take a trip to the swimming pool or out in the sea if the water is warm enough. Without diving, just swim and get a bit more feeling on the water, trying a bit back kick, and the more time you spend in the water, the better it is, with or without equipment, whatever you do. So because we are grown up on land, walking around on land. So
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And to be honest, too, I swear that's why I'm a huge fan of video, because no matter what, the video will not lie. So if you might think you're doing something correctly, and then you see yourself on video, and sometimes I need that visual, like, okay, like I feel like my legs are straight, they're not, but when I see it on video, I can connect it more and be like, okay, I need to over exaggerate it to make it better. So no, I definitely agree with that. Question: what is your favorite course to teach?
oh, favorite course to teach. I like everything what I teach. So yeah, I teach a tech one, the cave one, and the recreational classes, fundamental. I really like the K one is the kind of latest class that I started to teach. Started 2 years ago. What I like there is not only because I love the caves, but it's where you see even more than maybe in the open water technical part, where everything makes sense what we teach and how we dive in the cave, because the cave is talking back to you of feedback in another way than the open ocean is doing, in terms of proportion techniques, in terms of communication, and so on and so forth. So that's what I really like. And then, but having said that, I also like, yeah, the Rec 1 beginner classes. I mean, it's as I told you, you tell a beginner class student what to do, and he or she tried to do it, and there is no misconceptions basically, unless they've been diving before. And you really see also from an instructor perspective, how do you tell someone to to do a back kick? How do you, because the person does not know anything, whereas on the fundamental class, of course, a varied experience, but people have been there. They have maybe seen people doing back kick before, and they tried, and it's harder to get over obstacles that people create themselves than teaching someone from the start. But overall, what I like the most is motivated students. I just love motivated students. That's the best. It doesn't matter, what they struggle with in the water or what class they are in, but if they are motivated, then I get even more motivated. And I'm not saying everyone is motivated, but there are a little bit of a range of differences in their motivation. I do not like this kind of, especially when you come into the, what you would say, the level 1 classes and so on, where they start to rush into, how can I get my 25 dives the quickest and fastest to move on to the next level? And this is not how it's supposed to work. And that's probably one misconception from Jui's side, that maybe we have not communicated that in an appropriate way, because it's a minimum. and minimum of 25 dives before you move on. That's a bare minimum. And it's not the dives in itself that is important. It's more the experience that you gain during those dives before you move on to another level potentially. Yeah, so in summary, I like any class. I like motivated students, regardless of what level it is. Yeah.
Okay. And so do you split your time between Mexico and Norway, or do you try to spend more time in Mexico?
So now the last few years, I kind of split it. I think I started calculating. I think it goes in total maybe 5 to 6 months in Mexico and the rest in Europe. So mostly in Sweden and Norway, and I start to have some classes in Denmark as well. And I've had some trips to Spain and Croatia and so on, and that's also very good environments for diving and for teaching as well. Yeah, a couple of years before COVID, I stopped working in my full-time job, which was in the mapping business, with looking for oil and gas, working with GIS and mapping and so on and so forth. And I stopped that for a bit of reasons, and I then decided that, what I want to become when I get old is to become a full-time diver and instructor. So it's never too late, though. So then I went, and I have also been working a bit with a dive shop in Norway. However, when COVID came, it kind of was a little bit tricky. So then, so basically I started as a full-time instructor during COVID. Some people would say it would be a bit crazy, but if you're motivated, you can fix it. So so I because it's sometimes I'm a bit envious. No, I'm not envious, but I'm just like, if I live somewhere where you can dive and teach all year around, I'm kind of sometimes wondering what it would look like Mexico, for example. You can teach all year there. However, I'm not saying maybe in the future, I don't know, but I kind of like the variations of what the environment is bringing. And also, as I said before, I got into GUI to get more friends, and I need to, develop that and building a community or helping building communities, different places. And also now there are in February some Norwegians coming on the class in Mexico because they realize that they cannot take the class in February because it's too cold in Norway. And I also had some Norwegians coming for fundamental class in Mexico last winter, and also Norwegians coming for cave classes and so on. And there are some excellent diving opportunities in Norway. It's just when it's 20 Celsius below, it's a little bit restricted sometimes on land.
Okay. Okay. So, last couple of questions for you. You have a week off and you could go do any type of diving. Where would you go? What type of diving would you do?
I have a week off and I can go anywhere. I would go into the cave and stay there and go diving. Yes.
Oh, okay. Is that the Mexico caves or?
Well, if someone can fly me to Bahamas, I would like to go diving in the caves in Bahamas.
Oh, okay.
I've been diving with tiger sharks in Bahamas, but I've not been in the caves. However, it does not really, as long as I can go diving, I'm happy. I'm happy to go to the same places I've been diving before, and you can always see new things and experience new things. And if I make up a list of every place I would like to go, I get a little bit, kind of stressed. So I try just to enjoy any moments, and so just bring me to a cave for 1 week, and I will go if I have a week off. Yes.
Okay. That's awesome. And then my last and final question for you before I let you go is, and you kind of spoke about it a little bit throughout the episode, but what advice would you give to, you have that newer diver, maybe, they just completed their typical industry open water course and they want to sign up for a GUE fundamentals course. What are some of the best pieces of advice that you could give to that person going into the course?
If they already decided where they want to take the course and with whom, what the instructor is, I really recommend, if they haven't decided where to take it, I really recommend that they can ask the instructor if they could have a chat, like, a video chat, to get questions asked and answered, a little bit of introduction. If not, I would recommend that you make sure that firstly, that you have your motivation, and that you have set aside time for the class. So I have 4-day classes, and that's 4 full-day classes. So that means you have a dog, you need to find a babysitter for your dog, for example. Those practicalities. You got children, maybe needs to be picked up from school or something like that. You need to organize all those things, because you cannot organize that the day before the class starts. You need to be on top of that. So I would say that practicalities, like organize everything, and also equipment wise, if you don't have your equipment, do not run away and just buy anything if you don't know what you're going to get. Ask the instructor for recommendations, and also I would rather have someone borrowing my extra wing and so on if they haven't bought their own yet or uncertain, or if they can, you can give them advice along the way. So preparations in terms of practicalities, equipment, and the last thing, I guess, is preparation in terms of, that's a bit of a funny thing. That's the easiest thing that people can prepare, is the swim test. So the swim test. So people come sometimes to the class and they go, "Oh, I haven't been swimming for 12 years, so I haven't been." And I go, "What?" And it's like, this is swim test, and it's not hard, but you need to have some swimming technique, and also remember, what we're looking into GUE is not just to pass. We're looking into becoming better, to always kind of improve. So and that is something that you could prepare going to the swimming pool or to the sea before to practice. And another recommendations, now I guess I'm up to 4, there is to not be too hard of yourself about what the outcome is going to be about the class. People who have been taking fundamental class and coming into GUE diving know that we have a pass, provisional, and so on, and that if you end up having a provisional pass, that means that you have not failed the class. That just means that you need a little bit more time for the practice. Some people come into the class a bit nervous about, am I going to pass or am I not? And it's, yes, you are going to pass. It's just a matter of when. So I think that is a mental, what would you say, mental preparations. And the people who learn the easiest are the people coming in to just tell me what to do, and I will try to do it. I will test if it works or not. And open-minded, smiley people are the people who actually are learning the fastest, and the learning of their mistakes as well. Open to learning. That's my highest recommendation. And then we need to remember that we are doing this for having fun. Sometimes the conception or misconception might be that GUE is very strict and so on, but it's a matter of definition what you mean by strict, but it's certain standards you need to follow and so on and so forth. But I mean, we are here to have fun. We're here to enjoy diving, and I guess that's the really most important why we are doing this, and to improve for our safety, for ourselves, and for our team, so that we can dive safely and enjoy even more. So yeah.
Absolutely love that advice. And to be honest, like, so me with instructors these days, I'm extremely, I even say picky, to the point where I'm like, hey, I'll send an email, like you're saying, video chat, like let's get to know each other. Because that's, a huge thing is to be able to click with your instructor, but then to start out on the right path, because you don't want to learn. You're like, oh, I think I have to do all this stuff. And then you kind of make yourself worse off by teaching yourself bad, giving yourself bad habits, or just not having the information going in. So yeah, no, those are absolutely wonderful pieces of advice. And I thank you very much for saying them. And thank you very much for coming onto the podcast. This has been absolutely wonderful to just get to know you and chat with you. I will actually be in Mexico in May of this year. So hopefully if you're down there, maybe we can meet up and go for a dive.
Yeah, so just reach out and I will see where I am at that point.
Well, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.